Hello, my fellow book lovers. This is Bookmark, and this is Lessons from History. As a result of the coronavirus and all this shelter in place, I decided to pull an old book off my shelf. The book I chose to read is titled Lest We Forget: The Complete Story of the San Francisco Horror by the Survivors and the Rescuers. This book was published in 1906, right after the San Francisco earthquake. Within hours of word getting out that San Francisco was demolished by an earthquake, the publishers of this book sent two of the nation's best writers on trains to San Francisco. Once they were there, they started interviewing survivors and rescuers to obtain first-hand accounts of what it was like to survive their earthquake. All the pictures that you are seeing in this video are coming directly out of this 1906 book. The good news is that you do not have to rush down to your used bookstore and hope that they have a copy of this book. There are several printers who have republished this book, and I have linked in the description below to the book so you can purchase it on Amazon. In this book, you read the stories of the traveling salesman who wakes up in the morning of April 18th, 1906 to a major shaking. How he rushes downstairs, and shortly thereafter he is assisting in rescuing people from buildings that have been demolished. Some buildings stood strong. Others were absolutely destroyed, killing everyone in the building. One woman tells the story that she lived in a boarding house, and one half of the building collapsed, while half stood firm. However, the half that collapsed had the staircase down to the street, and so she had to carefully pick her way over the crumpled boarding house in order to get back to the ground. In this book, you'll learn that while the earthquake was strong and did some damage, the vast majority of the damage occurred because of fires that started almost immediately after the earthquake. Firefighters rushed around the city to quickly put out the blazes. But the problem was the earthquake destroyed the water mains, and as such, there was no water to put out the fire. For the next couple of days, the fires utterly destroyed the city. As you read this book, you are going to hear stories of how workers, soldiers, and complete strangers worked together to save certain neighborhoods and important government buildings. Since there was often no water in the city, the firefighters often had to resort to dynamite to destroy everything in the wake of the pending fire. Many men did not sleep for the first 48 hours after the earthquake. You will read of children who were the only ones left after the earthquake, and fire killed their entire family. You will learn of the generous contributions that quickly arrived from around the world to provide bread and soup lines so that the needs of the people could be cared for. As you can imagine, there was a lot of misinformation that occurred throughout the city during this moment of crisis. Stories like the famous Cliff House being thrown into the sea persisted for several days. As you read this book, you will learn about the men in Los Angeles who heard about the earthquake, who rushed to the train station to get the first train up. Some had loved ones in the city. Others were reporters who wanted to catch the story of the year. You will follow some reporters who rented cars and dashed to and from throughout the city to gain information, take pictures, and report on what was going on. One of the funniest stories in this book occurred as a result of all the bread and soup lines. Several young boys noticed that as soon as people saw a line, they would all just go get in line and wait their turn for whatever food this particular line had to offer. Well, these six boys decided that they would stand in line just to stand in line, and within 15 minutes, a line was formed around the block. A few minutes later, they snuck away, laughing at how they had gotten so many adults to stand in line just because there was a line. These boys evidently pulled this prank multiple times over several days. This book is not all about tragedy. This book tells the story of the men and the women who lost everything in the earthquake and fire, who married within days of the earthquake. You also read the stories of women who were pregnant who had to deliver their children even though the world as they knew it was falling apart. As you read this book, you learn about some stores that were looted, but you also read the stories of shopkeepers who would see that the fire was about to destroy their store. So they'd open the doors and tell everyone take what they could before the fire destroyed it. Well, this book is about the destruction of the city of San Francisco. It is more about the people who made San Francisco. It is a story of the survivors. It is a story of rugged individualism as people who were left with only the clothes on their backs were determined to rebuild and restore their lives. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor, the people were going to work together to overcome the obstacles that life had thrown in their path. As you get to the end of the stories of the people who survived the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, you realize that you're only two-thirds the way through this book. The book continues with the stories of the volcano that had just erupted in Italy a few weeks before the San Francisco earthquake. The book continues with a scientific explanation of earthquakes and volcanoes and then tells the story of several major examples of both that occurred around the world throughout the history of mankind. As we live in a day and time when there's a lot of fear about what is going to happen next, I would encourage you to read this book to help remind yourself that we can recover, and more importantly, that we will recover. Until next time, my fellow book lovers, this is Bookmark and Lessons from History.